Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Emmett Major. We have Gina, Dermody, is our adolescent psychotherapist with adolescents in Tuam. We have Niamh Flanagan, who's the school chaplain in Glenamaddy Community School. And we have Helen Butler here with us as well. And Helen works with Youth Work Ireland Galway as a youth coach and youth information officer. And she also works with the National Parents Council as well. There's a couple of people, if we might, as we go, if we see people, everybody should come in kind of muted, but if we have any kind of background noises, we'll probably mute people if we have to as we go, okay? And that's really the plan for this evening, is to cover the school transition as best we can. And we're going to be covering an awful lot of ground because we've done this for a few years now, and we'll be covering a lot of the very common questions. If people want to submit a question to the panel, I'm going to put it into the chat now in a second how to do that, so people can send in an email and we'll put it to the panel at the end if we haven't covered it as part of the conversation. And what I'm going to do now very quickly is just share this screen with you. You should be able to see a sort of a colorful logo there now. And I'm just going to explain a tiny bit of the background to this and show you the Step Up website as well. So the Step Up website was developed as part of this overall prevention program called Planet Youth that's operating here in the west of Ireland in Galway, Mayo, Roscommon, and has been since 2018. And it's to all intents and purposes, it's a public health program that's designed to improve long-term health outcomes for our school-going population. So our national school children and our secondary school children, supported by most of the statutory bodies in the region. And you can see here, this is why we do it. This is kind of a chart that was developed and shows change in Iceland, actually in Reykjavik, amongst their teenage population over the course of 10 or 15, 20 years around substance use behavior. So they went from having the highest substance use rates in the developed world to the lowest in fairly short order, and have kept them at the lowest since. And along the way, they improved lots of other health outcomes like physical activity, educational attainment, improved time with parents, juvenile crime came down, bullying came down. So there's all sorts of impressive changes in their youth population and in their economy, in fact, as well. So it's something we're trying to emulate and see, can we get their prevention model to work here? And some of the things that we look at are things like substance use is a concern, which I'll show you quickly, and then we can see other things in the data like screens and poor mental health being something of a small issue and lack of sleep being quite a big issue. So every 2 years in the west of Ireland, we survey all of our children at 15 and 16 on their return to school, having sat the junior certificate, and they sit down and fill in this very detailed and lengthy survey all about their lives, their life at home, their life in school, their life online, their hobbies, their sports, mental health, substance use. It's really all asked about and examined. And it gives us really the information to take preventative actions to prevent the next kids having the same issues, really. So that's why I'm talking about it here tonight. It's not just, we're going to talk about a lot of other stuff, really. It's more about school transition. But I'm really just giving you a few things now that you'll be forearmed with to try and prevent problems arising for you down the line. So these are kids at 15 and 16 in their 4th year of secondary school. So you're kind of a few years now to get ahead of some of these issues. Was a very big and still remains a very big undertaken. There's around 6,500 pupils participated in the latest survey, always around 5,000 target age of 15 and 16. And this is what we're trying to find out. Where can we make amendments and changes and improvements in these big areas of the life of a young person? So life at home is the biggest influence on them. The peer group is huge. What are they doing in their spare time is very important, and their school experience is very important. So these are the kids that survey, but it's more about the kids coming behind. These are your children now as they'll be starting in after the summer into first year. And then also we do a big piece of parental information at outset of national school. So they're 5 or 6 years old, maybe going into junior infants for the first time. We do a big distribution of this booklet. And if you're in a school in the west of Ireland, so we have 80 secondary schools in Galway, Mayo and Roscommon, you'll probably be getting home a copy of our first year parent guidelines booklet via your school in September here in the west, right? So about 6,000 of these will go out via our schools. It has a little bit of guidance, a little bit about what the survey says, a little bit about kind of things about bedtime. It'll come home in an envelope like this. It'll talk a little bit about the project, the importance of communication. It talks a bit about our problem around alcohol, particularly, which is our substance use problem with our young people. People think, oh, maybe it's cannabis, maybe it's something else. And we just go, oh, everybody's terrified of things like cocaine and stuff. But really, alcohol is the big kind of predominant issue we see with our teenagers. A lot of getting drunk from a young age is not good in terms of long-term health, right? So that's one thing we try and get ahead a little bit here, not to be giving our young people alcohol. They're going to come asking quite early. It might surprise you to learn that some of these kids will come asking as early as second year, can they have a can before the disco? And that sounds horrifying to you now, but not many. But by the time they hit TY, it'll be a very big part of the conversation. Can they have a can or two before the disco? And the more parents that can push it out, get them to 16, get them to 17, get them to 18, do your best to push it, the better it is for their long-term health. Basically, kids who start drinking from a young age, if they binge drink regularly from a young age, their risk for dependency jumps up enormously. It explodes really. 25-fold, I believe, is the number. So you're really, really just increasing risk by giving kids alcohol from a young age. So just do your best to push on that one. This booklet is available for download, and I'll just stick it up. If you're not here in the West, you might see it, but I'll stick up the link to it. And it talks to just how it shows kind of how important parental attitude is. So these are the kids that are asked in the surveys, and this is about 5,000 saying, how would your parents feel about you using cannabis? 97% dead against it, 94% dead against smoking, 90% dead against vaping, 57% dead against getting drunk. So we have a lot of parental tolerance around the topic of alcohol use, and wherever the kids are, this tolerance arises, the kids are getting drunk more. So it's just something we have to do a bit better with. And again, this is sort of kids getting drunk against parental tolerance. If their parents are totally against it, 13% of that group would get drunk. If their parents are against it, 20%, a bit against it, 41%. The parents don't really mind, it's up there, 68%. So parental attitude actually really does dictate how much kids are going to be using substances. So just to be mindful of that. Screen time has shot up actually over the course of the 4 surveys to date. It's gone up every time. I'll show you in a second. And it really, that sort of doesn't help with the big problem we see around sleep. So there's guidance around bedtimes. This is how much our teenage population is sleeping. Only 45% are getting the right amount of sleep, which is 8 hours or 9 hours a night. 32% are getting 7 hours. They'll catch up with a small lie-in, not the 2 o'clock, the 10 o'clock, maybe 11 o'clock, maybe lie-in. Nothing later than that at the weekend. They'll sort of catch up. The 23% on the right there, and that's a lot of kids, nearly a quarter of them, won't really ever catch up in their school lives or their personal lives. They're on the back foot with everything. And this is a part of the problem. 80% of our teenagers at this age have a phone in their room at night. And it's a big part of what we talk about here in the West now is how we as parents try and shift that to 50-50 or 80-20, even the other way, it'd be amazing. And in schools that are very mindful of this in the West and have done a lot of work in this space, we can see that number coming down to nearly 50% now. So it can be, effective if you try and get ahead of it as a set of parents in a school, but it's a big part of this problem. So have the phone charged in the kitchen or the hallway, and then this will just show you quite how important it is. Every single aspect of a teen's life is closely correlated to the amount of sleep that they get, right? So you can see here there on the left, these are kids who are reporting good physical health. So 82% of kids who sleep 8 hours a night report good physical health. And 72 at 7 hours, 62 at 6 hours, and only 47% of kids are getting 5 hours or 4 hours sleep a night. Same applies to mental health there in the middle one. And school engagement is a 10-item scale in the survey that really examines readiness for school, happiness at school, getting on with teachers, getting on with friends, that kind of stuff. Very little, only one question is to do with academic performance. It's more about readiness for school. And you can see of the kids getting 8 hours sleep a night, 60% of them would have a high engagement score around school, right? And that 47% at 7 hours, 36% at 6 hours, and then at the slightly less than a quarter of those kids would have a school, what's called a high level of school engagement or high school engagement score. So it's critically important that they sleep, or try and encourage them, try and help them with sleep, get the phones out of bedrooms and keep them out of bedrooms. Most of the people coming here tonight are clearly, obviously, they're heading into first year. They have the opportunity to bring that in as a rule at home, where the phone doesn't make it to the bedroom. It's always going to be charged in the hallway or charged in the kitchen. And you have some hope if you can start out with that rule. It's very hard to reintroduce it down the line. So there you have it. Phones handed up and charged overnight in the kitchen or hallway. 8 o'clock in first year would be good guidance for that. About an hour and a half, really, before bed, an hour and a half. And you can negotiate it after that. So you can go up a bit every year, what have you. But try and get the phone out of the room and try and get it out of the room ahead of bedtime, if you like. There's some good apps out there. They're only so good, though. They'll find workarounds and other ways around it, and extra phones and things or other screens. So but maybe for a while the apps will be helpful. And Webwise is a very good site. The webwise.ie is a very good site for information there. And that's it, really. You get to know the other parents as best you can, share information, have common boundaries, attend school events, get involved, and try and get to know the parents of the new friends. The friends will change over time. It's part of secondary school, really, and the guys will talk about it a bit. But like that, by working together, you can achieve a huge amount, or try to get to know the parents of the new friends. That's it, really. I'm just going to just flick over to this very quickly and show you two things here. Well, I'll show you two things here. So this is the first year parent booklet. It talks about, I was just showing it to you there, and it has all the information. You'll be getting this home if you have a child going into school in Galway, Mayo, or Roscommon. This is the little kind of sticker, kind of comes out. You can stick it on the fridge, guidance around bedtimes in first year and so second year and so on. This is the kind of more detailed information. This is all available on the website, the sort of city reports and the school reports and stuff. So these are what the kids in Galway City would have had to say about their school, their life experience and so on. Castlebar, for example, you have these area-based reports, and then down here, just wanted to show you this one quickly. So this is sort of the trend of social media use over the 4 surveys. You can see this sort of slowly been marching up. The only way it's been going is up. And this is time spent on social media every day. And that's about it. I'll just flick back here quickly to that one and to say we do put on usually every November kind of a webinar around the topic of sleep. So keep an eye out for that. There's also the reports are available on the website. You can see there the city report, the county report, the Mayo report, the Roscommon report, and that's the website, which I'll put that up in the chat now. So West.Planet Youth is the website. If I flick over to that here quickly, you'll see on that under resources, we'll see the guidelines for parents booklet there, or the videos where we'll try and get a recording of this video up. And then there'll be the research and data for the city and so on. So all of that's available on the west.planetyouth.ie website. And then we have this one here, which is the Step Up website, right? Which I'd encourage you to try and have a look at. Now you'll find that here under resources as well. Down here, you can see it says Step Up School Transition, but this is it here. And it talks about, this is what we're going to talk about, but school transition. So you can encourage a young person maybe to have a look at this over the summer. And we'll see here that these are the sort of topic areas: how school works, skills for school, tips from older students, loads and loads of good, useful information. Very popular website during the summertime. And I'd encourage you to, maybe sit down with your 12-year-old and go through it, dip in and out of it, dip out of it over the summer. So just to show you that quickly how school works, there's a load of different topics. For example, as you go down, we'd have school routine, timetables, lockers, school bags, a little bit of detail under each one. So say click on the timetable one, because that's one of the things that they'll have to get used to is moving around classrooms, extra busy day, how to maybe read a timetable or how to color code a timetable. So kind of useful information in there to maybe think about. And some links to websites. Another popular part of the site here will be...
Puedes poner a cargar el laptop porque está a punto de apagarse.
No.
This is kind of a very popular secondary website. So these are kids who are, in their senior years of school and leave in cert or in 5th year, maybe TY, who contribute to the site, and there's useful stuff in here. So, don't be afraid to ask for help if you get lost and so on, wherever. There's a nice one down here, actually, friendships. So when you start secondary school, chances are you'll be put in different classes to some of your old school friends. You'll still see them at breaks though, and you'll make new friends very quickly. Keep in touch with friends that go to different schools. It's good to have a circle outside school, people who have different interests and experiences. It's all good kind of useful information from kids that are a bit older. And so I'd just encourage them. That's the website there. And again, I'll put it in the thing. And that's it. Enough for me. I've been yammering on. I'll just drop all of that into the chat. That kind of, if you want to send a question in, we'll be covering a lot of ground now for the next 45 minutes or so. But if there's anything that's not coming up or you want to specifically ask about, send an email into info@planetyouth.ie and I'll read them out at the end. So that's it. I'm going to start going through the list of questions that have come in, right? And I think the first one's coming to you, Niamh. And like I say again, Niamh Flanagan is very kindly joined us. She's on holidays, I'd say, or nearly on holidays. She's the school chaplain with Glenamaddy Community School. And this one comes up all the time around anxiety. Niamh, my child is very anxious. I'm very worried about him going into a big secondary school. So this stuff here around, it's so common, right? But how do schools help young people when they start out in the big school and in the new school?
Well, I suppose the first thing to recognise is that, yeah, it is totally understandable if a child is anxious going from primary school to secondary school. It's such a big jump, and it can't be underestimated enough. You know, we're used to, us in school situations, we're used to a new set of kids coming in, we're used to a new set of faces. The first few weeks, everyone is looking out for those kids that are coming in for the first time. And, you know, there's people signposting the way and helping them to get around, navigate around the building and all of that sort of thing. So I think it's perfectly normal for a child to feel anxious and for a parent to be worried. But I suppose the thing is to just get it into perspective. You know, they're going to be there with a whole bunch of other students and they're all feeling the same way. I think I've been about 15 years now as chaplain in my school, and meet with first years on a one-to-one throughout the year, and there's no child who ever tells me that, oh, it was no bother, they weren't nervous. Everyone is nervous and they're all anxious. But what I would say is, if your child is particularly anxious, you know, to an extreme level, then maybe a tour of the school before school starts might be an idea in August, just to kind of get to see it and get the geography of the place. You know, there's a huge emphasis at the moment now in schools on well-being. So well-being is being placed on the timetable. So your child should have well-being on the timetable. So they're going to have classes where they get to kind of talk to other students, where the curriculum is designed around getting to know people, building friendships, building rapport and all of that sort of thing. So I think the main thing is to just trust the process. And if you have any extra concerns, just tell the school beforehand, really.
Can I just add to that one around maybe the mentoring side of things? A lot of schools would do like maybe not a big brother, big sister, but maybe they'd have a TY or a fifth year that would be kind of assigned to each student. Or, like, every school does that a little bit differently, I think, but that's a common enough thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. In our school now, it's senior students are assigned to a few kids. So there might be 3 first years assigned to 1 or 2 leaving certs or fifth years. So they can go to those if they're worried or if they're stressed or if they're not sure about something. They would have year heads. They would have, some schools have chaplains, other schools have career guidance teachers. You know, everybody is there on the side of the student to create an environment where they're as happy as possible. So yes, the systems are in place.
Thanks for that, Niamh. I'm going to put one to you, Gina. Let's read it off the screen over here. My daughter was isolated, bullied quite a bit by peers in national school, wasn't handled very well. These same girls are going to her secondary school. I'm worried she'd be left out. She refused to talk about now. So there's a tricky one.
I think we're seeing more and more of this, and what we don't want is carryover when we go to secondary school. So you think about, how did you deal with it when that happened to your child? You're saying your child didn't talk about it? So you can imagine then there's a lot of unprocessed feelings there, and usually then there's fear and phobia, and then there can be hope and fantasy around, I'm going to meet someone new. So just because someone isn't talking about it, it doesn't mean that you can't acknowledge it, and you can't say, you know, I'm aware of this, I'm aware they're going in, let's think about how we might handle it best. And sometimes we think it wasn't handled best because it is a very tricky area to handle, because you have parents involved, you have students involved, who said what, who did what, and it can go on very silently and sometimes very overtly, and still there's very little you can do. So I would keep the conversation light while acknowledging. I would say, right, let's have a code here for if it's not a good day, because I'm not going to, you know, when kids come home and you go, how are you? And they're like, oh God, you know, and maybe you have a chatterbox or a quiet one. So think about who your child, or as we're moving into your adolescent, is, and be creative. Don't ask them how was their day, because you're going to get fine. You're going to get, and remember, nothing happens in secondary school. That's what you're going to get told, nothing. Or such and such did this, and you get very little from what their lived experience is. So try and be very creative. You don't need to go into the school and inform them unless you have a very valid concern, because sometimes we have to help them navigate new friendships, and we have to really have a faith and belief that they have these skills. So you're honoring what they have, and you did manage that well, and it might be challenging. And let's go for a drive, let's go whatever, without being overly, because sometimes the parents have more anxiety than the actual adolescent, and we need to be cognizant of that in us. So go gently, be a good observer, be a really good listener, and be creative in your questioning.
Thanks for that, Gina. Niamh, have you anything to add in terms of the Beacon Alta type stuff? You probably have a bit of background on that. That's coming in every school now in September, isn't it?
Yeah. So every school now has developed a Beacon Alta, which means be kind policy. And as part of that, there's actually a student-friendly version that will be in the journals or, displayed in the schools and all of that sort of thing. So the whole country is trying to promote this Beacon Alta, this be kind setup where everyone is on board. And, like I was designing the poster this year with my TY students and getting some input from them. And so we've had feedback from students, we've had feedback from parents, we've had feedback from staff. So everyone is trying to work together to make schools as friendly a place as possible for students. So really, like, if they can just look at that, and oftentimes now, say situations of bullying, I'll be told by another student, or I'll be told by an older student or a sibling. So, what we try and promote in our school is a telling school, so that if they see something that they're not happy with going on, they will tell it forward, and that's usually how we find out that bullying is happening. But the other thing I suppose to remember is that bullying is repeated instances, that it's not a one-off unless it's online, where a one-off is considered to be bullying. So, oftentimes sometimes we use the term bullying when it might be just slagging. It might be innocent and harmless, but obviously every case is investigated and checked out. It takes a lot of teamwork, I think, to keep students safe, really. But yeah.
Thanks for that, Niamh. And to a degree, the good news is that there isn't a whole lot of repeated bullying behaviour in our schools. Tends to be quite small amounts of that, but there's little bits around exclusion, I think, as well, that are difficult. But listen, there's policies and a lot of attention given to it in schools, and so that's the good news. Here's a question for you, Helen, and this is a huge one for the kids as well. It's just this big change into a longer day, more subjects. That everything's like, there's a lot of kind of self-starting has to start now, come in first year. So organization and stuff. So here's a question: is there anything I can do to help my child to be more organized for school? He's not great when it comes to organization. You're on mute there, by the way.
This is a really good one if you can get it going as early as possible in secondary school. And because it's something that serves the young person well right through life, and not just in school. But for school alone, I think we should remember as well that part of adolescence is that our children are trying to become more independent of us. So when we teach them these things for school, we're teaching them for life. So they're very, very important things to get. So one of the first things is to read through that website that you mentioned, Emmett, stepup.ie. There's a lot of really useful information that's done in a young person friendly way. So having a look at them, maybe you looking at it, they looking at it, chatting about it in a very easy, sort of a calm way would be one thing. Another part of it is making sure that they have everything that they need for going to school. I know for myself that as soon as school broke, I packed up everything and got everything ready for secondary school so that I didn't have to look at anything again until August. So getting some of the things out of the way so that they're prepared and they don't have to, oh, I have to get this, oh, I have to get that. So that can keep things calm. I was talking to some 6th class students just last week. I was saying maybe get an alarm clock. Forget about your phone as an alarm, because we're trying to keep the phones out of the bedrooms. So maybe buying an alarm clock and just showing them how to use it, and also to say, well, can you be up tomorrow by 10? And set the clock and get them into the habit of this. Packing their bag before they go to bed at night. When they're finished and they're ready to go to bed, make sure everything's ready for school. getting into the habit over the summer, if they're planning to go somewhere, that they're ready the night before for that. So this is part of getting ready, when they do go to school. And I think talking about it and chatting, and this is where I think roping in granny or granda can be very handy as well, to have very nonchalant, very easy conversations about how you're feeling about it. And isn't it wonderful? And I suppose the last thing I'd say there is be a when parent as opposed to being an if parent. So when you settle in, when you're in there, when, because when always talks about possibility. This might not be happening at the moment, but it will happen. Whereas if you say if, you're inclined to say, well, it's not happening now, and I'm kind of doubtful that it might ever happen. So talking positively and reminding them, we can embellish our own time at school depending on how far back it was, but reminding them that, you were through that and older cousins were through this, and actually everybody in first year feels like this. So I think the organising thing, the getting their belongings ready the day before, the night before, having everything that they need, getting familiar with their timetable, and keeping the conversations very low key and chatty as opposed to, interrogating or looking for information would help a lot there.
Thanks for that, Helen. And I just encourage people to, if they can, maybe open the chat window at the side. There's a few useful things being added by parents and stuff that's Gina's put in there as well. So maybe have a look there if you can. And yes, this will be recorded. It'll go up on the Planet Youth website later this week. I'll come back to you, Niamh, if that's okay. My son's going to a secondary school where there's a big emphasis on sport. She's not sporty. I'm worried to be left out or picked on by others. This is something that I know you've talked about with your own fella before.
Yeah,
you have the answer.
Absolutely. I've often referred to my own son before about this. I have the most unsporty son on the planet. He used to say to me, why would I kick a ball around a green field? He just couldn't understand it, And he has gone through secondary school now. And I just always encouraged him to join other extracurricular things. If you look hard enough, the school will offer other things like, choir, music, chess club. There'll be something, cycling club. There'll be some other area to be able to get involved in. And I would encourage my child to join something, just some little thing outside of the classroom. Because in joining these things, you will make new friends. And what I generally see, I'll see the sporty kids and I'll see the non-sporty kids around the school, and they kind of are magnets for each other. So they will find each other, and they might be into video games or whatever, and suddenly they'll be, hanging around chatting about that. So I wouldn't overly worry about it. Everyone isn't sporty. Yes, sport is part of the curriculum, like PE and stuff like that, and you will have the worry of, my child will be picked last for the various different activities. But with the classroom management, that should be handled, in a way that's not obvious. So if the PE teachers are very much aware of all of that sort of thing. And if your child comes home and says, oh, but I'm so bad at this, I'm not any good, you just say you can't be good at everything, and just try and use it as a way of building up resilience, really. Okay, and touching on that one now, maybe Helen, you could touch on this for us. This idea of supporting kids through mistakes and errors and failures, and not maybe trying to do everything for them. I know you've kind of highlighted that at talks in the past, where don't be the parent that's fixing every problem for them or arriving in with the PE gear every time and the home ec gear, and sometimes there has to be a bit of responsibility and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, fast forward 7 or 8 years and they're living someplace else and they don't have any of the skills because we keep diving in to fix things for them. So this is a great time for the next few years to teach your child how to look after themselves and how to manage themselves. That self-management thing, not only is it about being able to get certain things done, but it does increase a young person's sense of self-belief when they feel comfortable that they can manage things. So we do have an obligation to help them with this. Okay, sometimes they forget something, and maybe it's really important, and you go to every length you can to bring it into school. But sometimes maybe it's as well to sit back and say, actually, I can't today. Once of having to say to somebody, sorry, miss, I forgot, might be enough to get them to remember it the next time. I wouldn't hang a young person out to dry with over something very, very important. But sometimes it's about learning the lesson. You know, you can do things like reminding them, say the night before, haven't you PE tomorrow? You know, have you got your gear ready? And they might be looking at you going, oh, don't you always do this? But, you know, say, go get your gear. I'll do it later. No, I'll do it now. Encourage them to set alarms in their phones for dinner time the day before, you know, PE tomorrow, and the alarm rings at 6 o'clock. And that's the cue to get up and pack the bag, or get the T-square for woodwork, or the ingredients for home economics, or whatever it is like that. Those things are there, because this is all about self-management, and this is a skill they need later. You know, I work with young people up to 18, and I stay in contact with them afterwards. And the ones who struggle the most are the ones who can't manage themselves when they live away from home. So we owe it to them to do that, but supporting them through it, you know, if they've never done it before, show them how to do it with them, and then remind them and oversee it, and then just remind them, and then just, you know, follow through like that, I think would help.
Thanks for that, Helen. One for you here, Gina. And by the way, I should have said, really, Gina has a sort of adolescent and family therapy or psychotherapy practice in West of Ireland in Tuam called Adolescent.ie is her website. If anybody's ever curious to look that up. I should have stuck it up in the chat. I will do it now in a minute as well. But here's one around confidence for you, Gina. I'm worried about my child's confidence. She was really shy around other people, tends not to talk much. Wasn't too bad in primary because everybody knew her from when she was small, and the class was small, so they got on well together. I'm afraid she'd be left out as she goes to big school, basically. So stuff around that kind of confidence, very shy child.
So I'd ask that parent, were they shy? And how did they manage? Because sometimes we use this word shy, and it almost feels like it's an affliction. And if we look around and we think who we went to school with, we all emerged at different times. And some of us were more reserved, some of us were more chatty. And we need every type of person in the world. So I would say, please don't think of shy as a problem. And please don't put the worry first. Think, okay, well, what are the talents and abilities, and what is the general nature of my adolescent? And if they hear you talking like that, and it says, gosh, you're such a good observer. Gosh, I bet you saw that. You see things other people don't see. Remember, their brain is still in development. So we're there to influence, and we're there to guide. And if you can put in that little nugget of, gosh, you know, that's a wonderful skill to have. You know, they're always looking for that in Google, or they're always looking for that in Planet Youth. You know, adolescents nearly grow 3 feet tall, and they go, wow. And gosh, that's very similar to your mom or your dad or your granny or whoever, you know. Gosh, if I'd had that skill. And we really have to, Niamh talked about, you know, more well-being goals in now, and we've more emphasis on kindness. And we know that we can get attached to that word shy, you know, as a kid, and we always remember, oh, you know, you're a bit shy, like, you know, like you had a disease. And it's like, no, I'm reserved. And I'm also a very good listener. Wow, you'd make a wonderful therapist. So you give them the impetus to feel confidence in what they have. And then you look at yourself and you say, gosh, that's a talent I have, or that's something I developed. So turn it more into a conversation rather than a, oh gosh, they don't talk. They all talk at some point. You know, I remember my son being in primary school, and he won't thank me for this now, but he did not talk for 3 years. He stood there and hands folded, and he looked around, and he did not talk. And I remember then when he started talking, I thought, oh gosh, would he ever be quiet? Right? Because he just chatted and chatted. And that's his nature till this day, like a really good observer. Really, really good. Now, I didn't get that talent off me, but he has it in abundance, and we use it, and we feed it back to them as, this is wonderful. And you get a lot further.
Okay, thanks for that, Gina. There's a couple here now, and I think between you, Gina, and maybe Niamh, we'll get through. I'm actually going to put 2 of them. There's a question to follow about ADHD and autism, which I think we'll come to in a bit, right? But there's one here more on dyslexia, dyscalculia. There's 2 here, and I'm going to kind of ask them both, and then we'll come to them at the same time, I think. So my son is dyslexic. He's a functional reader, so does not require support outside the classroom. However, he's very disorganized. His auditory processing disorder, misses a lot of what the teacher says. I'm concerned about his ability to structure his day, homework, etc. More importantly, be on top of the verbal information given to the teacher. Any guidance on how to help So that's that one. I'm just going to come back up to this other one, which is kind of in a similar kind of way. My child struggles with dyslexia. I have handed in all the reports for her, and I'm wondering what sort of supports will be there for her in secondary school. There's alignment in this space now, Niamh. Is every school treat this slightly differently, have slightly different resources and funding, or is there quite a lot of kind of similarities now between schools?
I can't really speak for other schools, but I know from experience, you know, we would often have students, say, who would have the benefit of an SNA in the room, even if it wasn't an SNA, say, that's necessarily assigned to them. So it could be possible to kind of tap into that. I'm just the first thing, I think you said the student has autism. Is that correct?
No, that was dyslexia, I think. There was a question, I'll come to on autism, I think.
Oh, sorry. So with dyslexia, well, my daughter has dyslexia, dyscalculia, and what I will say is she was extremely severe with that. She did have an iPad, and she had natural reader on the iPad. Now, what I would find the main thing for a 12, 13-year-old is that they get their homework written down correctly, and that if it's a thing that they come home and they're distressed and they say, oh, I don't know what we're meant to do, and they get all het up and worked up about it, to just say, okay, let's email a friend or let's email the teacher and find out what it is, you know. So just keep those lines of communication open. That's absolutely fine to do that. I'd often get an email from a student saying, sorry, I didn't quite understand what I meant to do. So, you know, I think that it's no harm to just flag it with the school. Just say, look, this issue is here, you know, I don't necessarily want a huge amount of interaction aside, you know, because you want your child to develop their own self-confidence, their own self-belief, and they don't want everything done for them. But just to be aware that supports are there if they're needed, really, you know, and certainly to red flag things, I think is a good idea, really, you know. You know your child best. You know what they're able for, what they're not able for. And, you know, the thing is as well, children with dyslexia, they grow and they develop at different rates. You know, I never, ever, ever thought I'd see the day where my child would be doing a degree in college, and she is finally, you know, a little bit behind everybody. But there's ways and means into everything, you know. So I wouldn't worry too much. I'd let it pan out, but I would, you know, give the information in, definitely.
Dyslexia and any processing challenge presents itself at various stages, and often you can have an overwhelm, can have a difficulty with concentration and focus. So definitely, I mean, not for any adolescent, but if there's any neurodivergence there, no phone in the bedroom, and you really have to limit screens times, because school day is a busy day and we're all watching someone else and thinking they're smarter than us and they can answer the question faster. So your adolescent may need a sleep when they come home. Don't bombard them with too many questions. Remember, they may have sensory overload, and you might be learning about their presentation as you go along, because this is new as well. Kindness, 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 patience, bite that tongue, bite it. And sometimes they feel like, you know, you may have a perfectionist there. If I don't do the homework, I'll get into trouble. Or you may have the one that throws the school bag from one end of the house to the other and it's not opened again till Monday. And remember, parenting an adolescent is a development process and you're doing it together. And then, you know, if parents are separated or divorced, you may have separate homes and you're trying to share the homework. So try and keep dialogue, you know, with whoever is in charge of the parenting to a nice manageable level. Can you help with this homework? I know I have dyslexia and dyscalculia, so I never did the maths homework because I was like, I'm going to confuse you, you know, and I recruited in support someone with more expertise than I. But there can be a lot of overwhelm, a lot of sensory overload. Read up on it. Remember, all these things are often hereditary. You may notice something in yourself and you're going, oh yeah, I find that difficult. And crowds and groups can be challenging, and other people can fly through and they go, I don't mind. And you know, sometimes they have to do a little bit more reading in primary school and standing up, a little less so in secondary school. So some of that stress is taken away. But see how they follow things, because you're learning about them. And these are presentations that as we get older, we learn more about them as well. But there are great supports. There are really good supports.
Can I just ask, we covered this a little, I did just to revisit this one very quickly around, we quite often get, where maybe a child is the only child coming from a school. A school might have 20 feeder schools, and there might only be one coming from a very small school, and if they're not in clubs, they won't know anybody. But this one here is like, about their son. He's always been a quiet child. He's come up currently struggles to talk when in a large group, feels unable to start conversations with people, tried speech therapy, attends social group at school as well as various clubs, will only talk to others if they initiate conversation. So they're a bit concerned. And he's also going from as the only child from secondary school. So there's a child that you might think is going to really maybe struggle a little bit earlier to make friends and that kind of thing. Would that be something worth flagging with the school, Niamh, or will the school pick that up naturally, do you think?
I'd say flag it, definitely. It should be no harm, rather than sort of the child getting distressed if things aren't going the right way, What I would say is, sometimes it's a bonus, and this is the way it might be sold to the child in this case. Like, sometimes it's a bonus not having friends going in because you're not kind of reliant on them, and people change as they get older as well. So it's a fresh slate, it's a fresh start, it's a new opportunity to make friends. Now, I would often deal with students who are finding it hard to socialise and to mix, and I loved what Gina said about shyness, maybe being a strength in some people. But what I would do with them is I'd do role play. So I'd have a few questions ready, that like a few little things that you can pull out of your arm or to talk to someone, like to initiate conversation, like, have you a pet? I have a dog and my dog is called whatever. Do you have a pet? That sort of thing. To have a few topics that that you can kind of pull out if you're kind of standing awkwardly and not knowing what to say. And also, to tell your child, look, your voice is really important. You have as much right to speak as the next person, because sometimes people don't speak because they don't feel worthy of speaking. And it's to just practice that, holding yourself up tall, holding your shoulders back and smiling. And that openness, suddenly people will be attracted towards you, and will initiate conversation. But look, school isn't easy, life isn't easy, and certainly socialization isn't easy. But, I have had cases in the past. There's one particular case I'm thinking of where there was a girl and she was just finding it so hard to make friends. And eventually it was actually her older brother who came to me about the problem. So I chatted to her and she just said, I just don't know what to say to people. I just find it so difficult. So we tried with her friends that she'd come in to school with from primary school. And, we opened up the conversation and, they realized she was struggling or whatever. It didn't work. It just didn't work. And the friends just felt burdened by the whole thing. So we left it a while. And we went back at it again a few months later. And I thought of another girl. I was watching, and I was saying, I think that person could be a good match for this person. And asked her, would it be something she'd consider? And she said yes. And matched them up, brought them into the office, told them, look, she's struggling here to chat to people and to make friends. And the other girl said, oh, I totally know that feeling. And they've been best friends since, So things have a habit of working out, and even if the journey is difficult. So I would just be, just encourage as much as you can. But, sometimes things take a little bit of time.
Thanks for that, Niamh. One for you here, Helen. I think my son, it looks like my child is worrying about how he's going to do such a long day at school and then come home and do more homework and then fit in sports in the evening. So there's your time management one right there. Yeah,
it is. It certainly is. And it's such a really common one. And I mean, first years are very, very tired, especially right up to midterm and maybe even a bit beyond. So for starters, I say for you to recognize this yourself as a parent, that your child is going to be more tired, which also means that they're likely to be much more grumpy or crabby in the evenings when they come in. The first part of it really is about getting enough sleep. I mean, you've talked about this, Emmett, with regard to the survey and the results. Teenagers are not getting enough sleep. And when you think of them as a small child, when they didn't get enough sleep, they were ratty and they were crotchety, and we'd say, oh, he's overtired or she's overtired. The same thing applies when they become, when they're in teenage years. The same thing applies to me when I'm overtired. I'm like a bag of cats, So getting enough sleep, talking to them about it, maybe returning the bedroom to a sleeping space in the evening time, because bedrooms are multifunctional. They can be all things to all people through the day, but at some point in the evening, turn it back to sleeping space and, quietness and low lighting and things like that. Encourage them to get enough sleep, getting up with enough time in the morning so they're not going into school rushing, because they're already going into school with a kind of a little burden of anxiety. Now, it mightn't be big, but it's just that whole new thing. Finding my way around, carrying my bag, who am I sitting beside, which teacher is which in the beginning. So the less of the little worries that they have as they go through the day, the less worn out they'll be by it. But I think as well, recognizing when they come in the evening, they need to be left alone for a while. I mean, you look up and smile, obviously, but don't ask a pile of questions. Know by the look of them. I can remember coming in from work one evening and my daughter looked at me and she just stopped and she goes, "I'll make tea." And I said, "Please do," but you can do that too, get them a snack or something and leave them be. And after a while, they'll start to chat. And if they are overtired, maybe they need to skip homework one evening. I don't know if Niamh would agree with me now, but speaking as a parent, I've done it a few times where I've just sent in a note and said they were too tired to do their homework, because it takes a while to get into the swing of things. But knowing themselves when they're too tired and knowing when they need to rest, and then trying to get the homework out of the way quickly, or get as much, stay on top of it if they can. Do it at the weekends, do it the night they get it. Know the night they have to go to training, so there's less time that evening. So I've got no carryover homework to do that night, and really trying hard. But I think young people also need to look at how many activities they have in the evening after school. Because I remember we did some webinars during COVID and teenagers were thrilled to bits not to be going out every night of the week and to get a bit of breathing space. So maybe their schedules need to be looked at as well, which I know if they're on Teams and that is not a winner, but we have to look at things. Also look at maybe reducing their chores. I mean, we'd hope that every young person does chores around the house, but perhaps for a little while reducing some of them just to give them a bit of space. They'd be the practical things.
Thanks for that, Helen. There's one here, it came in, the thing about just around ADHD, a recent diagnosis, right? So someone recently diagnosed ADHD. What supports need to be in place for child with timetables, organization, exams? Are there any real advice out there? Anybody know of any websites? I know there's a couple of the Galway.
ADHD website, is one of the best websites to go on. They have a huge volume of information. And if you think of ADHD, we think of it as a term, but it's so different for everybody. So as a parent, what I would do is I would keep a notebook and I would say, okay, how does it show up in my adolescent? Is it the sensory? Is it the overwhelm? Is it the overthinking? Is it the lack of organization? Sometimes we have the belief that, when they're going to secondary school, that some magic is going to happen and they're going to be organized and do stuff. And often what we have to do is we have to stay on that journey with them for a little bit longer. And it doesn't mean we're babying them or petting them. It means we're beside them, helping to develop life skills. And I think Helen and Niamh had said it earlier, we all get there at different stages. So if ADHD is present, then organization is very, very difficult. And you don't want the meltdowns in the morning. And we've all heard the term school avoidance, school refusal. That's high distress for everybody. And school isn't the problem. Most young people want to go into school. Some want to learn, some don't, but they want to go in and they want to have the crack. And so when they're refusing to go in, the distress has happened and you want to avoid all the panic and the stress in the morning. So I'm going to help you out. I wonder what you think is your biggest challenge. Like Niamh and Helen have both said, we need to be creative sometimes in our questions and our observations. I'm getting that this is difficult and I'm getting the focus is hard. Let's have a rest. I'm a big fan of putting on yoga nidra, where someone else has a far nicer voice than me. And for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and I often used to do it with my daughter when we'd be trying to regulate, like both of us, the ADHD family, and we'd lie down and someone would do all the hard work and I'd say, now, right, we're ready. And after 20 minutes, it is like sprinkling yourself with magic dust and you find the voice you like. So we often have to be so creative. And I know it's so easy to say, be patient. Young people aren't being awkward on purpose. They aren't trying to make your life a misery, but they're pushing the boundaries with development. So you've ADHD happening and development happening. And sometimes you're going, which is which, you know? And have an open conversation about it. What does your ADHD or ADD mean for you? Which part is habit? Which part is new? Which part is challenging? Which part makes you unreal? And there's so many books. I mean, because we're seeing the presentation, it was considered to be 1 in 4 with neurodivergence before. I'd say we're bordering on the 1 in 3 now. And there's so many resources, but again, read what you can read that makes sense to you. There's lovely YouTube videos on the brain and mindfulness and the brain, but again, you know, go with the ones that make sense to you and just say your brain is changing. Let's help try and regulate. A young person said to me recently, yeah, Gina, I'm not sure about this regulation thing you keep talking about. I said, okay, let's break it down into another language. And we did. And that becomes, but we have to journey with them. So someone might be saying, oh, well, you know, my Tom is doing great and so organized. And you're like, really? Okay. So you have to hold your court there and go, well, gee, my Tom is fabulous too. I mean, look how kind and wonderful. Academic measurement, you know, is one way we measure. And it's only one. And I think Niamh and Helen will both say this. And we have to help adolescents learn there's so many ways we measure success and ability and get that into the mindset.
Is there anything, Niamh, in your school? I know it's a common thing just around the school refusal. It's become, you know, it's something that everybody seemed to explode a bit during COVID. It's become this kind of big issue now around school refusal, school-based anxiety, that kind of thing. Obviously not something, you know, that you want to start, you know, once it starts to get very hard to stop, you know, so something I'd say to try and get on top of as quickly as you can or early if possible, take action early, that kind of thing. But is there anything that you've seen as a school that you try to engage with it around in any certain ways?
Yeah, like it's such a tricky situation. I think it's one of the trickiest really with regard to school settings. You have your child at home, you're trying to get them to go to school and they're just refusing to go, and they're, you know, they're crying and they're upset and they're genuinely feeling heartbreak for them, you know. So we would have cases where we might, you know, have a child come in after school hours just to walk around the building, kind of, you know, get themselves back in that way, come in for a bit of the day, whatever they can do. Sometimes we have to tailor timetables for students. Now, I don't know if that's possible in all schools, but we do it sometimes if we feel it will help. We'll do anything we can to try and get a child back to school because it's by far the best place for a child to be.
Yeah.
But as I say, extremely tricky. And, you know, I can understand how parents feel kind of caught between a rock and a hard place where they don't want to push it too much, but yet they're trying to be firm. But then there's always that worry, will my child do something silly? You know, and I do think this has been completely exacerbated by COVID, certainly.
It seems to be the case, yeah.
Yeah, it's always been there, but it's definitely more prevalent now. So, you know, I've tried little tactics with students like, you know, phone your friend in the morning and get them to encourage you along. The more they talk about it, sometimes people have school refusal, but they don't tell their friends about it. They don't say, look, I'm struggling with coming into school. Where if they did have a friend that they could trust to tell, then the friend might say, well, sure, look, I'll try and encourage you along. And that can make all the difference, because it's one thing hearing it from an adult, but when you hear it from your peer, it can make a difference.
Thanks for that. Helen, here's one. Should a desk in my child's bedroom be set up for homework instead of at the kitchen table? Concerned he'll be dossing up there without supervision. What do you think on that one?
Well, I don't think it's possible to do secondary school homework in the living room or the kitchen and things like that, really. And I think it puts a very unfair burden on a young person as well to try to concentrate when there are far more exciting things to be doing all around them. So I would use the summertime to say, do we need to rearrange your bedroom? You know, what could we do? Could we move the bed here? I mean, a small table that's maybe 2 foot by 2 foot. We don't need desks and swivel chairs or whatever, but making sure that if the desk is in a corner, that you've got a lamp, because the bedroom light will be behind them, and their head will block the light, so the light will be poor. a notice board on the wall, and create that sense of excitement and anticipation by creating the space. They can empty their school bag out in the bed and spread the books out and get what they want. And then when they're finished, they get to pack up everything they need for the morning. So you're killing two birds with one stone. But I do think that they do need that space. And I think it's good discipline for them as well. Now you can pop in, you can bring in a glass of juice. You can, I mean, there's ways of checking without marching in to check, you know. So coming in with the glass of juice or saying, you know, God, you've been in here for a long time. Do you want to take a break for 5 minutes? I'm not saying hiding outside the door ready to pounce or anything like that, but just letting them know that you know it's not possible to go in and study for 2 full hours nonstop. Why don't you come down, you know, come down for 10 minutes for a chat. Do you want to go outside, pick the ball or whatever, and back up again? And that helps to reset as well and gives their mind a little bit of a break for a minute. But definitely I would say that they should be studying someplace else. Maybe it's the sitting room, but if they go into the sitting room, then you'll never have the sitting room back. So creating the space in the bedroom might be the best place.
Watch for that. I've no homework. We've nothing to do. We got nothing for ages. And you're like, okay, you know, so just because they're in secondary school, it doesn't mean that you can't be interested and you can't check. You know, people are asking about the school app there, you know, that you can download that on any device and parents have access to it. So check, okay, well, you've got religion and sometimes the school timetable can be a bit confusing with the codes. Stick it up on the fridge. Well, yeah, I know I had a free class today. You know, it's great. No, I had learning support today. And you're like, yeah, and you got it all done, you know, right. And I think as Helen said there, you know, in and out to the bedroom, how's it going? And, oh, I need my phone now to do my homework. No, you don't. No, you do not need your phone to do your homework. Is that's like saying I need the telly there, you know, while I'm talking to all of you today. No, you don't, Gina. So you got to keep your boundaries. Keep your boundaries. And it doesn't matter if they say I'm a teenager, I'm this. Yes, I know, but I'm the parent and I'm really interested and I love you and you're fabulous and I'm going to help you. You know, even if they think you're a dinosaur, it's okay. You go, yeah, sure, yeah, I am, yeah. But I'm such a wise one. And so it's having a bit of crack and having a bit of fun with it too.
Thanks for that, Gina. And thanks. I think we're almost out of time, really. We said we'd call it the hour and it's coming up on 1:30. There's a couple of, well, one come up here and there's one come in on an email about phones that, you know, there's one of first years that don't have a mobile phone excluded and another one saying, my child hasn't got a phone yet. When should I get the phone? It's kind of, they're passing few now, children who don't have a phone by the time they get to secondary. It used to be confirmation was a very common time kids to get phones, but it's gone backwards and backwards and backwards. In fact, it was asked as a question in that latest survey that's done, and it's looking like it's around 20% of them are getting, 39%, I think, are 11 or younger, and 20% are 10 or younger. So it's working its way backwards and backwards and backwards. Unfortunately, because we can see the kids that get phones, it's really not great. It's not good for their health, their mental health, or anything. So they're not conducive to a happy, healthy childhood, unfortunately. But yet this pressure is on that everybody has to have a phone. So what I'd say on that is, yeah, by the time they hit into secondary school, it's why, you know, they'd almost be as well to have the phone at that stage. If you can hold off until the end of national school, I think that's the best time myself to be thinking about it during the summer. But the webwise.ie will give lots of good information and tips and guidance on, you know, how to navigate this space. So it's webwise.ie, right? But by the time they get into secondary school, you know, they'd be in a very, very passingly small minority if they didn't have a phone at that stage. Yeah. Okay, listen, I want to say thanks, Gina. Thank you very much for all the input, and Niamh and Helen and everybody for coming. I'm going to shut this down now very shortly. I'll be putting everything that we discussed up on the west.planetyouth.ie website under resources. So the video of the webinar will be available and the presentation I gave and anything that was sort of in the chat, maybe a couple of links to things like the ADHD Ireland one, the WebWise one and things like that, Gina's site. Maybe I'll have to put a few additional links in at the bottom of that as well. And there was a couple of queries around people that couldn't access tonight. So by all means, just share that with people if you know anybody that wanted to maybe look in. So hopefully you found this evening helpful. I know a lot of parents always find it very useful, and it's a highly anxious time for a lot of young people. That's why we do the webinar. So that's it. Thanks one and all. I'll hit the kill switch and have a good summer.
Thanks.
Thanks a million. Thanks very much now. Bye-bye.
Thank you.